Hi, I'm Rahel Philipose, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express News Show. In this episode, we talk about India's first win in men's doubles badminton at the Indonesia Open. We also talk about the World Health Organization flagging toxic medicines from India. But first, we talk about an Indian Express investigation that raises concerns about favoritism and alleged irregularities. Back in 2012, the Bihar government had launched an ambulance service to ensure that people in the state get free and timely emergency medical transportation to government hospitals.
It is 102 service. It's an emergency service. It takes critical patients, pregnant women, infants to nearest hospital.
That is the Indian Express's Santosh Singh, and he says that the service is part of the central government's National Ambulance Service, which was started in 2009 under the country's National Health Mission. Now, as part of the 102 service, the Bihar government awards contracts to private companies to run the ambulance fleet. And in 2017, the contract was awarded to PDPL, or Pashupatinath Distributors Private Limited, and the Sarmin Foundation.
But one thing is very important. PDPL had no experience in running ambulances previously. Once they got into, the partnership with Sarmin Foundation, which had experience in running ambulance services, they qualified for the project.
But this wasn't the only issue concerning PDPL. Turns out the company is actually owned by the relatives of an MP of the ruling Janata Dal party, Chandeshwar Prasad Chandravanshi.
See the directors. 5 of the 6 directors of the company is family members. 1 son, 2 daughters-in-law, 1 brother-in-law, 1 nephew. So it's effectively listing of his family members. And altogether, his family members account for 80% share in the company.
But what makes matters worse is that in the last 5 years, there have been several audit reports which have been very critical of PDPL's ambulance services. And this is especially concerning because it was their ambulances which were being used during the peak of COVID-19. And this includes the devastating Delta wave.
See, there is an organization under care that is called SRU, State Resource Unit, which does the internal auditing. See, they do internal auditing monthly, even on call when there are red flags, there are complaints from some quarters. They visit the area unannounced and they conduct inspection of ambulances. In certain instances, they found several ambulances were off the roads as well and no oxygen mask, right from the absence of nebulizers, oxygen mask. Even the bulb in the cabin was not working. Small details. And there was cutting across all districts, their finding was uniform about the unhygienic condition of almost all ambulances they inspected. And the finding of expiry medicine and the empty cylinders, even absence of oxygen cylinders, this was common with the service.
But what is important to note is that despite these concerns and the overall mismanagement, once PDPL's contract got over, it was again selected to be part of the bidding process. And the government renewed its contract for another 5 years.
Our contention is that when there was several red flags, how could a company like this standard could qualify for bidding against some global rivals? That is my question. This is where the conflict of interest, this is where the hint of favoritism comes.
And that is what Santosh's investigation is about. How despite multiple negative audit reports and irregularities, the government still awarded the National Ambulance Service contract worth 1,600 crore rupees to PDPL, which won the bid alone this time, without its previous partner, the Sarmin Foundation. And his investigation revealed that there were multiple irregularities in the bidding process itself.
When the bidding process starts, they invite RFP, request for proposal. After the request for proposal, they run some corrigendum, they do some corrections. Generally, corrigendum is run for 4-5 days, and within 4-5 days, the bidding stops. But in this case, a series of corrigendum ran for close to 1 month. First, they said, okay, since it is 102 ambulances, we should go by the system of quality-based service rather than going for the lowest bidder system. That was. First, they just changed this, they relaxed this norm, and since PDPL was not qualifying, they just tweaked it and they said, okay, let us make it L1.
Which means that the contract would be awarded to the lowest bidder, which in this case was the PDPL.
And also, it didn't have experience in running ALS, Advanced Life Support Ambulances. It didn't have the requisite 3-year experience. It just had experience of 2.5 years. And first, the RFP said that a bidder must have experience of running 50 ALS ambulance. But PDPL didn't have that experience, others had. Then they brought it down to 40 ambulances. So it was the first hint of tweaking of norms.
And during this time, a document was leaked about the bidding process, which raised more concerns about the process. And to challenge the process and the changes in the tender norms, the Samman Foundation and their new partners, BVG India Limited, went to court.
So court took serious note of that. And top up it all, 3 RJD MLAs complained against it to the then Health Minister Mangal Pandey and State Health Society of Bihar. But nothing happened.
And the government awarded the contract to PDPL despite the Patna High Court's directions, which said that the government should wait until the case is closed to award the contract.
Ideally, they should have waited. Our question is, what was the urgency in awarding the contract? It was just a matter of a month now. Patna High Court could have taken the final call and they should have gone accordingly. But instead, they took the opinion of AG, legal opinion, superseding the court's caution. They took the legal opinion and went ahead the legal opinion and awarded the contract to PDPL. And when they awarded the contract on 31st May, the RFP condition said that they should pay 3% of the project cost. That comes to 47 crore. But in this case said that you just pay 0.6 crore. It's different thing. There was complaint against it again and they then revised it. But what it suggests, right from the start till the end, there had been enough hint of favoring a company owned by family members of ruling JDU MP.
And Santosh says when he asked Chandravanshi, the JDU MP, about these allegations, he didn't give any convincing answers.
Then we asked about the conflict of interest and the propriety. I said, you got the first contract when you were in MLC. You got the second contract when you are an MP. Isn't it conflict of, is it sheer coincidence? Isn't it conflict of interest? So he could not come up with any convincing answer with that. Nitish Kumar is not the one to favor anyone. We were in business for a long time. We got the contract purely. And then he said, okay, I have no say in the company.
But this reasoning, of course, doesn't pass muster, considering that 5 out of 6 directors in the company are his family members. For this story, Santosh also reached out to the RJD, which is currently in alliance with the JDU, but had been in the opposition when their MLAs had first complained about the bidding process.
We spoke to one of the 3 MLAs who had complained, Bhai Birendra, he is MLA from Maner. He said, as a politician, I have my limitations. I did what we should have, as RJD MLA, as a leader in the opposition camp should have done. But now you can understand my political constraint. So he was empty. He was clear what he meant to say. He didn't say in those many words.
Now, according to Santosh, who has been covering Bihar for years, this case raises concerns about the growing instances of political patronage and favoritism in the state.
In 2021, we did a story, if I remember correctly, in September on the Nal Jal scheme. It was also a story of political patronage. Several the Nal Jal projects were awarded, and then Bihar Deputy CM Tarkishore Prasad, a leader of BJP, his family members were awarded the contract, and even several JDU leaders, even from RJD, cutting across all political parties. So what is a matter of concern is that the family members of politicians and power people, they float company and they have their interest in the government projects, government contracts. I'm not saying it is wrong to do, but there should be, I think, a criteria. I think though no regulation of bidding and tendering process, it's very difficult. That's it. And
next we talk about 2 Indian badminton players who made history this week. The duo, Satwiksairaj, Rankireddy and Chirag Shetty, won the men's doubles title at the Indonesia Open. And with this, they became the first doubles pair from India to win a Super 1000 badminton title. But their win did not come easy. They were up against reigning world champions from Malaysia, Aaron Chia and Son Woo-ik. Satvik and Chirag had earlier lost to the Malaysians on 8 previous occasions. In this segment, the Indian Express's Shivani Naik, who reports on badminton for the paper, joins us to talk about why this victory is such a big deal for India and what's next for the two shuttlers. Okay, so Shivani, for our listeners who don't necessarily follow badminton regularly, can you explain why this is such a huge victory for India?
Oh, it's massive because India has done well in singles, all these years. But since the time of Prakash Padukone and Gopi Chand and Saina and PV Sindhu, Srikanth. But doubles was not something that India was great at any point in time before. So for a doubles pairing from India to actually go out there and win at the Indonesian Open is a massive, massive deal.
Okay, and they've become the first Indian pair to win a Super 1000 badminton title. Can you tell our listeners why this is such a big deal?
So there are grades to tournaments. There is a World Championship which sits at the top of the ladder, which is the ultimate. Of course, there's the Olympics. But just below the World Championship, there are 4 tournaments. You can compare them to tennis Grand Slams, but it's slightly different in badminton. But there are 4 Super Thousands, including the All England, which I'm guessing a lot of listeners might be familiar with. So there is the All England, there's the Indonesia Open, there's China Open and Malaysia Open. And winning any of these 4 is a mighty, mighty task. It's really difficult because the fields are very strong. Every badminton player at that top level amongst the top 10 participates in these 4. So the draws are really, really tough. So for an Indian pairing to win, having beaten the world number 1 and world number 3 en route to their title is massive.
Right. And has this happened in the past as well? I mean, what has India's track record been at these major tournaments?
So since the time that the Super 1000 started, India is not really a Super 1000 ever. Of course, at Indonesia, in the previous avatars of tournaments, we've had Saina Nehwal win, we've had Kidambi Srikanth win in 2017. But since the time that the Super 1000s came up, this is India's first. And to think that it was doubles who has actually cracked the code.
Okay, and Shivani, coming to the winning pair, Satvik and Chirag, what has their journey until the Indonesian Open been like?
So yeah, they've been ticking all the boxes. They have a World Championship bronze medal. They've won at the Commonwealth Games. They are the reigning Asian champions. Now you have to understand that the Asian Championship in badminton is far more probably tougher than the Olympics because Asia is good at the sport. And you have draws which are completely filled with the top-ranked players at the Asian Championship. For Satvik and Chirag to actually win at Indonesia, it's come after a bunch of losses, early exits, which happened at Singapore and at Thailand. And they kind of bounced back from those results in the last few weeks. There were 5 tournaments back-to-back that we're talking about. And there were early exits for this particular pairing. But they kind of bounced back from there and went on to win Indonesia, which is awesome.
Right, and you've been following them for a while now. So what stands out about this pair?
Right. So, see, they're a tall pairing, okay? Life tends to be difficult if you're tall in doubles badminton. But they have a very, very good crouching defense, which basically means that when they are in their squat defense positions, they can actually parry the shuttle back. So defense used to not be one of their strong points earlier. But I think what Indonesia has shown is that when the conditions are suitable for their game, they can all-out attack. But their defense can also kind of withstand the pressure it definitely withstood the pressure from the Malaysians in the final. So they are a fun pairing. They smile a lot on court. They engage the crowds. They love playing, and it shows.
Right. And speaking of their opponents, these 2 Malaysian players, what was Satvik and Chirag up against and what was their strategy in the final?
Right. Their opponents are the reigning world champions. Okay. The Malaysians won the world championship and they won the world championship beating the Indians in the semi-finals last August. Now, they're an extremely tricky pair. And the Malaysians had actually beaten the Indians 8 times and never lost to them prior to the Indonesia Open. So that makes it super special. As far as the tactics go, it was all-out attack. The 8 times that this pair has lost to the Malaysians, they tended to be a little more restrained, a little subdued when the Malaysians kind of force their style of play, which is like flat, fast rallies. But this time, I think it was the Indians completely dominating with their attack. They even turned some of the defensive shots into attacking winners. So I think that was basically what the strategy was to go all out and not give the Malaysians a chance of coming back.
Okay, and Shivani, what's next for them? What are the things that they're looking forward to in the future?
So they play in Japan, they play in Korea after this. But as far as goals go, I think the World Championship is going to be a massive goal this time. There is also the Asian Games happening in China later in the year. And India has not won an Asian Games doubles medal. Sindhu has a silver from last time, but India's never won a doubles medal. So Asian Games is also where all the teams, where all the pairings come mighty prepared. It's prestigious. So, the Asian Games is going to be probably 2023's main target. And there is, of course, the Olympics next year. Now, this particular pairing, they were at Tokyo, but they couldn't really go past the first round, go past the group stage, basically. And they were extremely disappointed. So they are really, really keen on doing well in Paris. And then that would be the goal.
And in the end, we talk about toxic medicines. Last week, the World Health Organization had flagged 20 medicines as toxic as part of their investigation into the deaths of 300 people from across the world who had consumed contaminated cough syrups. And they had identified India as one of the countries from which toxic medicines originated. For listeners who may not remember, since last year, 88 people died in Gambia and Uzbekistan after consuming Indian-made cough syrups, and since then, the Indian government has tightened the regulations before exporting medicines. To know more about the issue, my colleague Utsa Sarmin speaks to the Indian Express's Anonna Dutt.
So, Anonna, can you first tell us why the WHO flagged these 20 medicines as toxic?
So, since October last year, there have been a spate of incidents where cough syrups or paracetamol syrups or vitamin syrups contaminated with ingredients known as diethylene glycol or ethylene glycol. These are not meant to be in medicines, but can get into it because a solvent called propylene glycol is used, and sometimes, just to cut costs, some manufacturers might not test it thoroughly and there could be contamination. So there were instances. First one was flagged in the Gambia, where 4 India manufactured syrups were highlighted. Similarly, there was an instance in Indonesia where 8 Indonesian products were highlighted, which led to around 200 deaths in the country. There was an instance from Uzbekistan. Then there was an instance where, of course, there was no deaths, but contaminated products were found in Micronesia and Marshall Islands. So in total, so far, since last year, WHO has raised alerts that we know of for 15 syrups in total across these countries. And they said that now, after we spoke to WHO, we were informed that so far they have actually detected 20 syrups in total from 15 different manufacturers. And in all these cases, the country of origin is either Indonesia or India.
And do we know if the WHO is investigating whether these instances of contaminated syrups in different countries are linked or not?
So they have been investigating in wherever the countries have raised alert for these contaminated products. And there are some countries, in addition to the ones for which WHO has raised alerts, like Nigerian authority, which tested samples that were collected from Liberia, has also raised an alert saying that, a syrup is contaminated. So for these instances, I think the investigations are still going on and the WHO hasn't raised raised a medical product alert yet. However, the thing is, with these incidents happening suddenly all together, WHO definitely is looking at a link, but they have said so far they haven't found any.
Right, and now coming to India, can you tell us how the government has responded to these incidents of contaminated syrups being flagged by different countries?
So, of course, in every instance, the Indian drug regulator has conducted investigations into what has happened. They have checked the manufacturing facilities of these companies and have also halted production for these. I am not aware of what has happened in the most recent case, the drugs found in Liberia, but it is most likely that such action would be taken even in that case. The Indian regulator also tested the control samples. Control samples are samples that are maintained by the companies for each batch of product that they either export elsewhere or sell in Indian markets. Other than that, one of the main steps that the government did take, and this happened in May end, they said that all syrups that are meant for export will have to be tested by either the central government laboratories, they have these regional laboratories, those or state government drug laboratories that are NABL accredited. So all these syrup batches have to be tested in these labs. They have to get a certificate of analysis, and only then they will be allowed for export.
And Anonna, what sort of concerns does it raise for India, which is trying to become a medical hub for the world?
Yes, we do supply medicines to a lot of countries. And of course, there is an image of Indian generics being cheap. But the government has been trying to say that, okay, it is cheap, but it's affordable. But at the same time, it's quality medicine. So when alerts like these get raised, that of course hampers the image of India as a good drug manufacturer. And this is, I think, one of the reasons that was considered by the government for testing the products before sending it out. So usually what we do is we test every batch of medicine that is released in the Indian market. But we depend on the other countries that are importing our products to test it on their own when they are getting it. But now the government has made this provision specifically for the syrups so as to not have these things happen. Then other than that, the government has also been now conducting risk-based inspections at several drug manufacturing facilities just to, see whether they are following all the good manufacturing practices, whether everything is up to the mark in these companies, just so that, the manufacturing is done with utmost care and there is no, scope for someone saying that the medicines are not good.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was hosted by me, Rahel Philipose, and written and produced by me, Rahel Philipose, Shashank Bhargava, and Utsa Sarmin, who originally spoke to Santosh for the first segment. It was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone who you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Podcasts and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.